Title: The Vampire in New York. New York never stops moving. But at 3:17 a.m. in the Lower East Side, everything was still, except for the blood leaking down the alley wall. The body was found slumped behind a nightclub, pale as paper, 2 deep puncture wounds in the neck. No blood. Not in the body. Not on the ground. Detective Lena Maris lit a cigarette with shaking fingers. She'd seen plenty of corpses in this city, but none like this. The coroner looked pale, even for a guy who handled autopsies daily. No signs of struggle, he muttered. No spray. No bruising. Just emptied. Lena stared at the wounds. You ever see a junkie suck someone dry like this? He gave her a look. Lady, this ain't drugs. This is ritual. What neither of them saw, what none of the NYPD would believe, was the figure watching from the rooftop above. Motionless. Cloaked in black. Eyes glowing faintly red. He was already choosing the next one. His name had been forgotten 100 years ago. Now the city knew him only by rumor, whispered by homeless shelters, street kids, and the dying, the vampire in New York. And his hunger was just waking up. A woman in her 20s, bartender, according to her ID, was found in a subway tunnel beneath Canal Street. Same wounds. No blood. But this time there was something new. A symbol. Scrawled on the wall behind the body in a brown-red smear, like someone used the last drops of life to paint it. A circle with 3 jagged lines cutting through the center. Lena snapped a photo and cursed under her breath. This isn't random. Her partner, Jace, shook his head. You thinking cult? I don't know what I'm thinking, she muttered. But 2 bodies in 2 days, same signature. This city's seen a lot of crazy, but this feels old. Later that night, Lena sat in her apartment, the symbol pulled up on her laptop. She cross-referenced gang tags, satanic groups, even esoteric graffiti databases. Nothing. Until she stumbled onto a scanned page from a banned book, Creatures of the Night, True Accounts of Predators That Walk Among Us. Printed in 1899. There it was. The same symbol. Next to a woodcut image of a pale figure with sharp eyes and a trail of corpses behind it. The caption read, Mark of the Nosferatu. Last seen in New Amsterdam, 1664. Lena leaned back, heart pounding. Nosferatu, she whispered. You've got to be kidding me. But in the shadows of an abandoned church uptown, he was already feeding again. His hands gentle, his teeth precise, his victim paralyzed with unnatural calm. The vampire licked his lips, eyes flickering with thought. She's looking for me. And he was starting to remember her face. Rain poured down over the stained glass ruins of St. Elias Church, long abandoned and forgotten by most of Manhattan. Inside, moonlight filtered through broken windows, casting eerie light across the cracked marble floor. He sat in the pews, still, regal, as if attending a service only he could hear. The vampire. He had no name now, not one that mattered. But before the centuries blurred together, before cities rose and fell, he was called Sebastian Moreau, a nobleman turned creature of the night in the winter of 1643. Betrayed, cursed, exiled. Fed to something older that lived beneath New Amsterdam. And he survived. Now, centuries later, he was back in the same city, different name, same hunger. He held an old pocket watch in his hand, the kind that hadn't ticked in 100 years. Inside, behind the glass, was a tiny, faded photograph. A woman with dark eyes and the same face as Lena Maris. He remembered her now, Eleanor, the healer who tried to save him once. Who bled for him. Who died in his arms before he ever became a monster. But the face, it hadn't aged. It had returned. He closed the watch, stood and turned toward the crypt beneath the church. There, in stone coffins and dry silence, slept the old ones, those he had locked away, those he swore never to awaken. She's back, he whispered, and the city's about to burn again. Meanwhile, Lena Maris stared at the photo she found on an old occult forum. Sebastian Moreau, circa 1600s. Her breath caught in her throat. He looked exactly like the man the kid on the street described last night. Tall, pale, eyes like red embers. The same man from her dreams. And suddenly, she wasn't sure if she was hunting him, or if she was meant to find him. The precinct smelled like stale coffee, sweat, and stress. Detective Lena Maris sat at her desk, staring at the photo of Sebastian Moreau. She had a sick feeling in her gut, part fear, part déjà vu. Looks like a vampire movie reject. Jace joked behind her. You okay? She didn't answer. Instead, she zoomed in on the eyes. There was something alive in them. Something impossible. Before she could speak, a uniformed officer rushed in. Detectives, body just dropped. Midtown. Lena's heart sank. Third one in 3 days. The scene was chaos. Flashing lights. Crime tape. A crowd of horrified onlookers. But it wasn't the location, or even the condition of the body, that made Lena's blood run cold. It was who it was. Detective Jace. Hung upside down from a street lamp, throat slashed clean, blood drained. His badge was pinned to his chest with a bone. And written on the pavement in blood was one word: remember. Lena fell to her knees, the world spinning. This wasn't a message for the police. It was for her. She looked up just in time to see a figure in a long coat vanish into the alley. Without thinking, she chased. Through dripping tunnels and dead-end streets. Her footsteps echoed, breath ragged, heart pounding. And then he was there, standing in the dark. Come, pale, ageless. You haven't changed, he said, voice like velvet dragged over razors. Even death couldn't erase you. Lena raised her gun. Who the hell are you? He stepped closer, unafraid. You knew me before this city had a name. Before I lost myself. Sebastian. His lips curled into something between sorrow and a smile. You remember? And then, in a blink, he was gone, vanished into mist, leaving only silence. And the blood of her partner cooling on the concrete. Lena didn't sleep. She couldn't. Not after seeing Sebastian. Not after finding Jace hanging like a warning in the dark. But when her body gave out and she finally drifted off, the dreams returned. Only they weren't dreams. Not anymore. She stood in a cobbled street lit by torches, not traffic lights. The air smelled of horse sweat and burning pitch. A woman's hands, her hands, held a satchel of herbs stained red. People shouted in Dutch. A bell rang in the distance. She turned a corner and saw him again, Sebastian. But not the monster. Not yet. He was human here. Young. Dark coat. Kind eyes. And he was dying. Blood poured from a wound in his side as she pressed the herbs into it. Stay still, she said, her voice shaking. I can stop the bleeding. You can't, he whispered. Not this time. Behind him, shadows moved. Hooded figures with burning eyes and mouths that hissed forgotten words. The cult, the ones who turned him. She tried to scream, to fight, to stop it, but the memory played on. Sebastian was taken. And the last thing she saw before waking was her own death, her throat slit by a blade carved from bone. Trying to save the Lena woke choking on her breath, soaked in sweat. But she remembered now. She was Eleanor, a healer, a fighter. The one who tried to stop the ritual that birthed the vampire in New York. And she'd failed. Now, in this life she had another chance. But the darkness was rising again, and she wasn't sure she had the strength to face what he'd become. The rain hadn't stopped in days. New York felt heavier. Like the sky knew something was coming. Something ancient. Something wrong. Detective Lena Maris walked through a forgotten part of the city, an underground passage sealed off since the 1800s, buried beneath Chinatown. Her badge couldn't help her here. Down here the cops didn't matter. Down here they still whispered in the dark. The cult. The ones who turned Sebastian. She'd found the lead in an old journal, hidden in the NYPL archives. The same symbol from the subway wall was etched into the page beside the words, "They never died. They just moved underground." Now she was underground too. Her flashlight flickered. Something scratched against stone. A whisper that sounded almost like her name. Eleanor, she spun. Nothing. Then she saw it, the altar. Same circle and claw symbol carved into the floor. Fresh blood in the grooves. A body recent, laid across the stone. Eyes burned into her from the shadows. Figures stepped out of the darkness, faces hidden under hoods. One held a curved dagger. Another carried a bowl full of red. Lena raised her gun. Back off. They didn't flinch. You cannot stop what's already begun, one rasped. He feeds again. And soon the gate opens. What gate? The abyss, said another. And he will be its king. Lena fired. The closest hood dropped. The others hissed like snakes and scattered into the dark, vanishing as if the shadows swallowed them whole. She looked down at the altar and saw something scratched into the blood. He remembers too much. Far above, in a penthouse with blacked-out windows, Sebastian stood at a mirror, staring at his own reflection. It had returned, and he was afraid. Not for himself, but for her. Because he knew what the cult wanted now. And it wasn't just blood, the city was quieter now. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was the kind of stillness that settles before a storm breaks. Lena sat in her car, watching the darkened streets of Manhattan. She hadn't been able to sleep for days. The cult was growing bolder. Each body left behind wasn't just a sacrifice, it was a call. A warning. She reached into her bag, pulling out a photo of Jace. She didn't want to believe he was gone, but deep down she knew the truth. And Sebastian. She couldn't stop thinking about him. The man who wasn't a man. The vampire whose past had become her past. The same face, the same hunger, the same blood. There had to be something she could do to stop this. To stop him. To stop the cult from finishing what they'd started centuries ago. Suddenly her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Come alone. 2 a.m. West End Pier. Or he dies. Lena's heart skipped a beat. She didn't hesitate. The pier was empty, save for the faint hum of the ocean and the distant lights of the city. But when Lena arrived, she wasn't alone. Standing by the edge of the water, bathed in moonlight, was Sebastian. His expression unreadable. His eyes, those red-tinged eyes, were locked on hers. And behind him, in the shadows, the cult emerged from the darkness. One by one they stepped forward, their robes rippling like smoke. Lena's gun was in her hand, but she didn't raise it. Not yet. You said I would die, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Why? Sebastian's face twisted into a cold, bitter smile. The cult does not die. They feed on the living and they feed on the dead. And you, Lena, have been their bloodline. Her pulse quickened. She'd known the truth was too dark, too deep to escape. I remember everything, he continued, his voice softer now. Eleanor, you died to save me. And now you're here again and they've returned for you. The cult stepped closer, chanting in low, guttural tones. The air grew thick, heavy with magic. Their eyes glowed just like his. Lena took a step back, heart racing. You want me to die again? To be their vessel? Sebastian's lips curled into something dangerous. No, Lena. Not die. But become. Before she could react, the cult leader, an old man with white hair, raised a hand. Lightning struck the ground between them. We've waited for this day, the leader croaked. The girl who remembers. She will lead us to the gate. And you, Sebastian, will open it. Lena raised her gun, firing at the leader, but it was already too late. Sebastian moved faster than she could see. His fangs were exposed, his form a blur of darkness. He tore through the cult, one by one, until they were nothing more than bloodstains on the concrete. And then, in a single motion, he turned to her, his eyes wild with anguish. I'm sorry, he whispered. But it wasn't just an apology. It was a promise. The cold water lapped at the edge of the pier, mingling with the stench of blood that clung to the air. Lena stood frozen, her gun still in her trembling hand. The cult was gone, their bodies now nothing more than crimson stains across the concrete. But the silence was unbearable. Sebastian turned away from the carnage, his face etched with an expression she couldn't read. His eyes, once a familiar red glow, were now clouded with something deeper. Something darker. I'm sorry, he said again, his voice barely above a whisper. But I'm not the monster here. Lena's heart twisted. You killed them. I had no choice. His voice cracked, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something like fear in his eyes. Fear of himself. They were going to open the abyss, Lena. They were going to drag both of us back into it. She took a hesitant step forward. What is the abyss? What are they trying to do with me? Sebastian's face hardened. The abyss is a place, another realm, where the dead belong. It's where the curse began. The cult, those monsters you just killed, are the ones who summoned me. They've been searching for you. For centuries. You and me were tied to it all. To them. He turned toward the water, his jaw clenching. And now, you're the key. Lena's blood ran cold. The key to what? To opening the gate. The wind howled across the water as the city stood still, oblivious to the horror that was unfolding. They'd never know the danger that had walked past them, the ancient curse that had stalked the streets for centuries. But now they would feel it. The ground trembled beneath their feet. Lena's pulse raced, heart pounding against her ribs as she looked at Sebastian, seeing. His breath caught. He turned as if expecting her to be standing there, her eyes full of warmth and determination, ready to fight by his side again. But she wasn't. Only the rose remained. Days passed, and life in the city continued without acknowledging the terror that had nearly swallowed it. But Sebastian knew better. He could still feel the threads of the curse stretching across the city, faint but present. And the whispers had started again. The cult hadn't been entirely destroyed. Something had survived. He began his search, digging through ancient texts, scanning old occult symbols, hunting down anyone who might know something about the remnants of the cult that had once tried to bring forth the abyss. And then, in the heart of the city, he found them. A hidden shrine. It was buried beneath the foundations of an old warehouse, forgotten by time. The walls were covered with symbols that burned with a faint, green light. Sebastian's breath hitched when he saw the familiar markings, the same as the cult's but older. And then, the final realization hit him. Lena hadn't just sealed the gate, she had created a new one. A way back to the abyss. A way for the curse to return. Sebastian wasn't sure what to do with the knowledge he had unearthed. The abyss had been closed, but the power of the cult's bloodline remained. And the remnants of their influence still lived. He couldn't let it happen again. But could he stop it? Could he find Lena? Or had she truly been lost forever? The road ahead was long. The battle unfinished. And as the night sky glowed with the moon's pale light, Sebastian knew one thing for certain. The abyss wasn't finished with him. Sebastian's grip tightened around Lena's wrist, his heart pounding in his chest. The dark energy that had swirled around them, an unrelenting force that had pushed back against every effort, began to subside. The power of the abyss was still alive, but Lena's presence was enough to stem its tide, for now. Her body trembled in his arms as the darkness receded, the air around them growing thick with an eerie stillness. The world felt like it was on the brink of collapse, but as Lena's breath came in shallow gasps, something in her expression softened. "Sebastian," she whispered, her voice so fragile it almost seemed like a dream. "I'm sorry. I never wanted this. I never wanted you to suffer because of me." The words were an echo, a reflection of the haunting truth that had followed them both since the beginning. Lena had sacrificed everything once before, and now, here she was again, on the brink of something even darker. "You're not to blame," Sebastian murmured, his hand still pressed to her chest where the jagged shard of stone had pierced her. The stone pulsed with a strange energy, its glow dimming as the power of the abyss receded. But Sebastian could feel it. The battle wasn't over. Not yet. He looked down at her, the woman who had once filled his world with light. The woman who had given him everything and yet, in return, had been devoured by the very curse they had both fought to end. "I'll do whatever it takes to protect you," he whispered, the words laced with a desperation he hadn't allowed himself to feel in centuries. But this was different. This was real. And he could feel it, the world teetering on the edge of destruction, and with it, his last chance to make it right. The shadows in the room began to move again, swirling at the edges of the crumbling shrine like dark serpents. They were drawn to the power of the stone, but also to Lena. Something about her, the way she had died, the way she had been resurrected, had twisted the very fabric of the curse. Lena's fingers brushed against his chest, weakly at first, and then with more purpose as she struggled to sit up. "I can't let you keep this up," she gasped. "If you do, you'll lose yourself. I've seen it. You can't keep sacrificing everything for me." "I'd do it again," he said fiercely, his eyes flashing. "If it meant saving you, I'd do anything." Her lips parted, her breath catching as though she was about to speak again. But before she could, the entire room shuddered, and the walls cracked under the pressure. The abyss was clawing its way back, stronger now, more desperate than ever. "Get out of here," Sebastian growled, his eyes flashing with anger. "I can't keep this back much longer." "You have to," but it was too late. The mist returned, thicker and darker than before. It filled the air, and from it emerged a figure, tall, imposing, cloaked in shadows that writhed as if alive. The creature stepped forward, its eyes glowing like molten gold, its smile wide and cruel. The figure wasn't human. Not entirely. Sebastian's heart sank as he realized the truth. The abyss hadn't just opened. It had brought something back with it. "You're too late," the figure spoke, its voice low and terrible, the words like the death knell of the city itself. "The gate is open. The curse is alive." Lena's body stiffened in Sebastian's arms, her breathing labored. The creature seemed to savor her pain, a sickening glee flashing across its twisted features. "You did this," the creature spat. "You thought you could destroy the curse by killing it, but you only made it stronger. Now you will both perish, together." Sebastian's blood burned with fury. The darkness around him seemed to grow in strength, a relentless force that crushed his every attempt to fight back. The power of the abyss surged through the room, pulling at his very soul, trying to tear him apart from the inside out. The creature's voice filled his mind like 1,000 whispers, promising death and destruction. "You were never meant to save this world," it hissed. "You were meant to serve it, to feed it, to be its vessel." "No," Sebastian growled, his voice steady even as the walls of the shrine began to collapse. "I've already made my choice, and I won't give up. Not now. Not ever." He could feel the darkness tugging at him, trying to pull him into its eternal depths. But he fought it. He fought with every ounce of his being, fueled by the memories of Lena, the woman who had once been his salvation. But as the creature drew closer, the world around him seemed to blur. The air thickened. The sky outside the shrine, visible through cracks in the decaying walls, turned a sickly shade of red. The abyss was opening wider than ever before. Sebastian's heart pounded in his chest as the creature lunged forward, its claws tearing through the air. But before it could reach him, a blinding light cut through the darkness. In that moment, something deep within Sebastian stirred. The blood of the vampire. The cursed soul that had lived for so long, and yet here it was reaching for something more. Something deeper. He pushed himself to his feet, his hands glowing with a strange, holy energy that had been locked away in him for centuries. It wasn't power drawn from the abyss. It was something else. Something pure. "I won't let this happen," he said, his voice like steel. He thrust his hands forward, and the light expanded, flooding the shrine with a brilliance that forced the darkness. But the creature screamed in agony as the light burned its shadowy form, causing it to writhe and twist. But even as the creature shrieked, the ground beneath them began to quake. The abyss was not just a realm of darkness. It was a living, breathing entity, a force that could not be easily banished. The light around Sebastian flickered, and Lena's voice came to him once again, weak but clear. "You have to stop it, Sebastian." With that final plea, Sebastian's heart broke, but he knew what he had to do. To end this, to truly seal the abyss, he would have to give up the one thing he had left: himself. Don't forget to like and subscribe and watch out for the next.